Bastogne, December 1944. The air was so cold it felt like breathing needles. The whole 101st was surrounded, but for us, the 333rd Field Artillery Battalion, the colored unit, we were on the absolute frozen edge of the perimeter. "He's crazy," I heard the new white replacement mutter to his sergeant as they passed my emplacement. They said Sergeant Williams is crazy. I didn't turn. I just tightened my grip on the spade grips of the Browning M1919, my Mary Ann. She wasn't an anti-aircraft gun. She was an infantry support weapon, a 30 caliber meat grinder designed to fire across a field, not up into the sky. The Quad 50s were 5 miles back, protecting the divisional command post. They sent me out here to this frozen crossroads with a single 30 cal and 1,000 rounds of ammunition. It wasn't a tactical position. It was a sacrifice. They called me Crazy Williams, not because I heard voices or shook from shell shock. They called me crazy because I didn't flinch. Because when the artillery came in, I didn't dive for the bottom of the foxhole. I just got lower behind the gun, put my helmet on the breech to keep the snow off, and waited. They mistook a man who had already accepted his own death for a man who had lost his mind. Then I heard it. Not the rumble of panzers this time. Something worse. A high-pitched, tearing sound in the grey sky. Stukas, Stukas in the trees. The scream of the Jericho trumpet siren from the dive bomber was designed to break a man's will before the bomb ever hit. I saw 2 of them, the Ju-87s, banking hard over the snow-covered pine trees, their crooked wings looking like a vulture's. They were coming straight for my crossroads. The replacement was already gone, diving headfirst into a ditch. I yanked the charging handle, chambered around, and pointed Mary Ann's barrel straight up at the sky. Here is part 2. Part 2, the technical problem. The problem wasn't the gun. The M1919 Browning is a work of art, an air-cooled, belt-fed 30 caliber machine gun that can fire 500 rounds a minute. It's a beautiful, simple, reliable killing machine. I'd torn her down and rebuilt her in total darkness so many times I could do it in my sleep. The problem, like in the Springfield story, was the target. But this was a different kind of impossible. A Stuka Ju-87 isn't just a plane. It's a piece of psychological warfare. It's an inverted gull-winged monster built to do one thing: dive vertically. It doesn't fly at you, it falls on you. It comes down at an 80-degree angle, and that screaming siren, the Jericho trumpet, isn't just for show. It's a weapon designed to make disciplined soldiers panic, stand up, and run. And the moment they run, the gunner in the rear seat cuts them in half. To fight a plane, you need a weapon built for the sky. You need a Quad 50 4M2 Brownings firing 1-200 rounds a minute, throwing 50 caliber slugs the size of your thumb. You need a 40mm Bofors gun that fires explosive shells, creating a flak box that the plane can't survive flying through. Those are anti-aircraft weapons. My Mary Ann was an infantry weapon. It was mounted on a tripod designed to stay low to the ground. It fires a 30-06 round, a rifle bullet. It has no lead computing sight. It has no high-speed traverse. To aim it up, I had to physically pick up the rear leg of the tripod and brace it against my hip, an awkward, unbalanced, completely off-book position. I was fighting a dive bomber with a rifle on a stick. The doctrine was clear. If you are an infantry machine gunner and Stukas are diving, you are not the solution. You are the target. Your job is to dig in, find cover, and pray that the real AA guns 5 miles back can see him. Your job is to suppress the infantry that will surely follow the bombing run. You are never to engage an aircraft. It's a waste of ammunition that your platoon will need 5 minutes later. It's a suicide mission, because firing at the plane just paints a giant flashing red arrow at your exact position, making you the Stuka's personal target. That's why they called it a suicide mission. That's why they put me here. They needed to defend this crossroads to protect the main supply road, but they wouldn't waste a real AA crew or a real gun on it. So they sent the crazy black sergeant with the infantry machine gun. It was a position designed to be overrun. I was a speed bump, a human sacrifice put here to buy the real soldiers 5 minutes. But those officers, the ones who saw me as crazy or expendable, they didn't understand the M1919. They saw it as a ground weapon. I saw it as 500 rounds a minute. They saw a waste of ammo. I saw a stream of lead. I knew something they didn't. You don't have to hit the pilot. You don't have to hit the engine. A plane moving that fast, under that much stress, just needs to be touched. A single 30-06 round in the wrong place, a control flap, a hydraulic line, even just smacking the propeller at the right or wrong time is enough. A rifle bullet won't blow it up, but it can break it. And as that Stuka screamed, and its siren ripped at my nerves, I wasn't thinking about doctrine. I wasn't thinking about wasting ammo. I was thinking, you're made of aluminum, and I've got 500 rounds of steel. I flipped the sight leaf all the way up, not for aiming, but just to get it out of the way. I'd be walking the tracers. I gripped the spade handles, braced the tripod leg against my hip, and pointed the barrel at the grey German sky. They called me crazy, Williams, but they didn't understand the nature of my madness. It wasn't shell shock, it wasn't a death wish, it was clarity. My secret knowledge was this. I had been at war long before I ever saw a German. The white officers, the replacements, even some of the seasoned GIs, they were fighting one war. They were fighting for God and country, for the flag, for the girl back home. They had something to return to. They had a life, a normal, that they were afraid of losing. That fear made them sane, it made them duck, it made them follow doctrine. I was fighting two wars. First, there was the war against the Wehrmacht. But second, there was the daily grinding war against the US Army. The war against the officers who saw me and my men as baggage. The war against the white sergeants who gave us the worst details, the oldest equipment, and the most exposed positions. My craziness was born in Normandy. We were attached to an infantry division, tasked with hauling ammunition for their 105mm howitzers. We were a colored unit, so we were mules. We weren't supposed to fight. We were supposed to carry. Then a German counterattack punched through the line. A Panther tank and 2 squads of Panzer Grenadiers hit our supply dump. The white infantry unit we were supporting fell back. They ran past us, shouting, "It's a breakthrough, every man for himself." Our officer, a young white lieutenant named Miller, just froze. He stood there, pistol in hand, watching his real soldiers abandon the line. He looked at us, his black troops, as if he'd forgotten we were even there. The Germans weren't going to check our skin color before they shot us. So I did what they told me I wasn't supposed to do. I jumped on one of the 50 caliber machine guns mounted on our truck, a gun we were supposed to use only for anti-aircraft defense, and I turned it on the German infantry. I didn't wait for an order. I didn't ask permission. I just fought. I held that trigger down until the barrel glowed red. My men, seeing me fight, grabbed their rifles and fought with me. We stopped the attack. We held the line. We saved the supply dump and the retreating white infantry unit. 2 days later, Lieutenant Miller wrote the after-action report. It said that he had rallied the men and directed the defensive fire that repelled the enemy. He was recommended for a Silver Star. He didn't even mention my name. He didn't mention the 333rd. We were just the men. That was the day my craziness began. I realized that my life, my courage, my skill meant absolutely nothing to them. I could die for them, and they wouldn't even write my name down. They would steal my valor and call it their own. So I stopped being afraid. What was there to lose? My life, they were already treating it as worthless. My reputation, I didn't have one. I embraced the one thing they couldn't take from me, my own integrity. I stopped caring about their rules. I stopped caring about their doctrine. I focused with a cold, pure rage on only one thing: excellence. I would be the best drilled sergeant in the battalion. My men would be the sharpest. My gun would be the cleanest. And when the enemy came, I would not flinch. I would not wait for an order from a man I didn't respect. I would act. They saw this cold, detached professionalism, this lack of fear, and they didn't understand it. It didn't fit their picture of what a black soldier was supposed to be. We were supposed to be either happy-go-lucky clowns or simple-minded laborers, easily scared. This cold, efficient, fearless man, this Sergeant Williams, he didn't fit. So they called me crazy. It was their pilot error. It was their slack in the cables. They used that word to dismiss me, to make sense of something their prejudice couldn't explain. They didn't realize they had given me the perfect camouflage. As Crazy Williams, I was invisible, I was unpredictable, and I was the most dangerous man on the battlefield because I was the only one who had already given up everything, except the fight. That's why they sent me to this crossroads. It was a crazy man's post, a suicide mission. They sent me here to die. They didn't realize they'd just put the right man in the right place at the right time. They didn't realize my madness was the only thing that could save them. The forbidden solution was simple. I was going to fire. This sounds obvious, but in the US Army of 1944, it was an act of profound defiance. The rule, the doctrine, was clear. Do not engage aircraft with infantry machine guns. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was a core tactical principle. First, because it was considered ineffective. You're firing a rifle-caliber bullet at an armored 300 mm target. The math is a joke. They drilled it into us. All you do is waste ammunition that your brothers will need for the infantry assault that follows. Wasting ammunition in a besieged city like Bastogne wasn't just a mistake, it was a crime. Second, it was tactically unsound. Tasked to firing at a Stuka is like waving a giant red flag that says, "Hey, here I am. The most annoying, most defiant, most important target in this entire grid square. Please drop your 500-pound bomb directly on my head." Doctrine said to dig in, shut up, and survive the air raid so you could fight the real battle on the ground. But I saw the forbidden solution in the gap between their rules and my reality. Their rules were written for men who had something to lose. They were written for sane men who wanted to go home. Their rules were designed to conserve assets. But I wasn't an asset. I was expendable. The white officers who put me here expected me to die. This position wasn't meant to be conserved. It was a forlorn hope, a speed bump. They had already written me off, and in doing so, they had accidentally given me perfect freedom. If I'm already dead, I can't be court-martialed for wasting ammo. If I'm already dead, I don't need to worry about the Stuka targeting me. If I'm already dead, I am no longer bound by the sane man's doctrine. My craziness was my key. They saw a black man with a death wish. I saw a man with nothing left to lose and a target-rich environment. The forbidden solution was to reject their valuation of my life. They saw me as a zero, a crazy colored sergeant not worth a real AA gun. I would accept their valuation. I would become a zero. And as a zero, I was free to do what no sane soldier would dare. I was going to use their wasted ammunition to fight a battle I wasn't supposed to fight. I was going to turn this infantry weapon into an anti-aircraft gun. I was going to take the suicide mission and turn it back on the enemy. The Stuka screamed, its siren ripping the frozen air. The replacement in the ditch was praying to his god. The officers in the CP were probably looking at their maps, writing this crossroads off as a loss. And I, crazy Williams, braced the M1919 against my hip. I wasn't doing it for God or country or the 101st Airborne. I wasn't even doing it to save the men in the rear. I was doing it because the Germans had come to my gun. And in my world, in my state of absolute clarity, you do not mess with my gun. I watched the first Stuka as it began its vertical dive, its siren reaching a brain-rattling crescendo. It was coming for me, just as I'd hoped. "Come on, you son of a bitch," I whispered. "You think I'm crazy? Let me show you crazy." As that Stuka pointed its nose at the earth, its scream wasn't just a siren. It was the sound of Private Samuel Smiley Dubois dying. Smiley was from New Orleans. He was 19. He was called Smiley because the kid was physically incapable of not smiling. He played trumpet in a second-line band back home, and he could make our field rations taste like Creole cooking with a few stolen spices. He was my gunner, the number 2 on my M1919 crew, and he was the reason I was crazy. It was Normandy, just after the breakthrough. We were at the supply dump I mentioned, the one that got overrun. When that Panther tank came through the hedgerow, it wasn't alone. It had a Schmeisser, an MG42, set up on its flank, just spitting fire. It was chewing up the ground around our trucks, pinning everyone down. Lieutenant Miller, the white officer, was hiding behind a stack of sea ration crates, yelling, "Return fire! Return fire!" It was a useless, panicked order. We were returning fire, but we couldn't see the MG42. "Sarge, I see him," Smiley whispered to me. He was pointing. "He's in that ruined barn, top window. I can see the flash." He was right. A dark window, in a pile of collapsed stones, maybe 300 yards out. It was a perfect sniper's nest. "Keep his head down, Smiley," I said, loading a fresh belt into Mary Ann. "I'm going for the truck gun." "Yes, Sarge," he said, and he gave me that 100-watt smile. I made the run. 30 yards of open ground. Bullets snapped at my heels. I dove behind the deuce-and-a-half truck, climbed into the cab and swung myself into the ring mount 50 cal. The world looked different from up there. I saw the flash from the barn. I gripped the butterfly triggers, found the target and let the 50 cal rip. It was beautiful. The tracers just walked right into that window, thump, 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 blowing the stone apart. The German gun went silent. I swung the 50 toward the Panther, just to keep its commander's head down, and that's when I saw it. The Panther's main gun was traversing. It wasn't aiming at me. It was aiming at my nest. "Smiley! Move!" I screamed, but he couldn't hear me over the 50 cal. He was doing his job. He was still firing the M1919 just like I'd told him, keeping their heads down. He was a good soldier. He was following orders. The Panther's 75mm cannon fired with a crack boom that shook my teeth. It wasn't a direct hit. It didn't need to be. The shell was high explosive. It hit the dirt mound 3 feet in front of Smiley's gun. The concussion, it picked him up and threw him backward. The fighting was over a minute later. The remaining Germans pulled back. I jumped down from the truck, my ears ringing. Lieutenant Miller was already standing up, dusting himself off. "Good work, Sergeant," he said, as if he'd done something. I ignored him. I ran to the gun pit. Smiley was gone. He was still there, but he was gone. The blast had taken his smile. It had taken everything. His chest was a red ruin. He was 19. He died following my order, doing his job, being a good, sane soldier. Later, at the field hospital, I sat with him. I was holding his trumpet's mouthpiece, which he kept on a string around his neck. I was there when the medic, a white corporal, was filling out the tag for his body. "Cause of death?" the corporal asked the orderly. "Artillery," the orderly said. "No," I said. My voice was hoarse. "It was a tank." The corporal didn't even look up from his clipboard. "Tank. Artillery. It's all KIA. Enemy action. What does it matter?" It mattered. It mattered that he died because I told him to stay while the white lieutenant hid. It mattered that he died following rules that got him killed. And then, 2 days later, I heard the story. My story. But it was Lieutenant Miller's story now. How he had braved the run, how he had manned the 50 cal, how he had silenced the MG42, how he had saved the day. My rage was so cold, so total, that all the fear just burned away. It left nothing. Just a quiet, clean, empty space. Smiley died being sane. He died following the rules. I stood over his grave, marked with a simple cross. I put his trumpet mouthpiece on the fresh-turned earth, and I made a vow. Never again. I would never again follow an order from a man I didn't respect. I would never again let doctrine kill one of my men. And I would never ever flinch again. If the enemy came, I would not hide. I would not wait. I would meet them, and I would send them to hell. This was my madness. It was a memorial. It was the armor I built around the hole that Smiley left. So as the Stuka screamed down on me in Bastogne, I wasn't just hearing a siren. I was hearing Smiley. I was hearing the Panther's gun, and I was hearing the lie from Lieutenant Miller. This time the tank was coming for me, and this time I wasn't going to let it fire first. This time I was the one on the 30 cal, and I wasn't going to move. The siren was no longer a wail. It was a physical weight pressing me into the frozen mud. The first Stuka was in its final dive. Vertical. He was coming straight for me. I could see him clearly. The crooked wings, the fixed landing gear that looked like talons. I could even see the dull glint of the 500-pound bomb tucked under his belly. He had seen my muzzle flash from part 1, or maybe he was just aiming for the crossroads. It didn't matter. He had chosen me. This was the moment. To my left, 50 yards away, was a half-track full of white infantrymen from the 101st, huddled behind it trying to get small. They were the ones who had called me crazy just minutes before. They were the real soldiers. To my right was the ruin of a Belgian farmhouse where our aid station was. Doc Matthews, our battalion surgeon, another black man and a good one, was in there with 3 wounded men from our battery. If this bomb hit the crossroads, it would kill me. That was a given. But the blast radius would also shred that half-track and collapse what was left of that farmhouse. I looked at the huddled white soldiers. They weren't shooting. They were cowering, just like Lieutenant Miller. I thought of Doc Matthews in the farmhouse. I thought of Smiley dying in the mud because he'd followed the rules. And I heard the replacement, the kid in the ditch behind me, whimpering, not even praying, just making a high-pitched animal sound. This was the crossroads of my life. I could be sane. I could follow doctrine. I could dive into the ditch with the whimpering kid. The bomb would hit. It would kill the men in the half-track. It would kill Doc Matthews. And it would kill me. I would die, sanely, in a ditch, having accomplished nothing. Or I could be crazy, Williams. I could accept that I was already dead. I could stand in the face of the impossible. I could fight a battle I was supposed to lose. If I fired, I was still going to die. The Stuka was too close, he couldn't miss. But if I fired, maybe he would die too. Maybe I could make him flinch. Maybe I could spoil his aim. Maybe I could push that bomb 20 yards to the left or right. Maybe I could save the sane men who despised me. Maybe I could save Doc. The turning point wasn't a tactical decision, it was a choice of how to die. Would I die as a victim? A colored soldier following the rules, blown to bits in a ditch, forgotten by history and cursed by the men I failed to protect? Or would I die as a man? On my feet, behind my gun, spitting 500 rounds a minute at the sky, taking the bastard with me. Lieutenant Miller back in Normandy had stolen my valor. The army had stolen my dignity, but they couldn't steal this. This moment was mine. This death would be mine. The Stuka was filling my entire vision. The scream was inside my skull. This was for Smiley. I braced the tripod leg against my hip. I wasn't modifying a gun. I was modifying the purpose of my death. My madness was now my only weapon. I pressed the butterfly trigger. The world vanished. There was no Bastogne. There was no snow. There was no whimpering replacement in the ditch. There was only the sound. The Stuka had its siren, a demonic scream designed to break the mind. My Mary Ann had her own voice, a deep, hammering, defiant roar. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It was the sound of a giant sewing machine, stitching a seam of hot steel straight into the sky. The M1919, unsecured, bucked and vibrated against my hip. I roared with it. The brass casings, glowing hot, poured out of the ejection port, melting a black circle in the snow by my boot. The smell of burnt cordite and hot gun oil filled my lungs, a perfume better than any Chanel. This was my modification. This was my piano wire. A sane man tries to aim. A sane man with a rifle tries to calculate lead. A sane man tries to hit a specific spot, the engine or the pilot. A sane man fails. I was crazy, Williams. I wasn't aiming. I was creating. The tracers, every fifth round, were glowing red fingers. I wasn't shooting at the Stuka. I was drawing a line in the sky. I was building a wall of lead, a curtain of .30 caliber flak that the pilot did not expect. I was walking the fire, holding the trigger down and forcing the plane to fly through my storm. The Stuka's own cannons opened up. Wang! Pock! Thwip! Rounds stitched the ground just in front of my emplacement. Dirt and ice exploded, stinging my face. The pilot was aiming at me. We were in a duel. His 20 meters cannons against my .30 caliber machine gun. He was supposed to win. He had the high ground, he had the explosives, but he was sane. He was a pilot, following his training. His dive was precise, calculated. He expected me to be a sane man and hide. He did not expect me to stand up and challenge him. He did not expect me to meet his gaze. My tracers were walking up his fuselage. I saw them. Pink, pink, pink. Just tiny sparks of light against the grey-green metal. Thunk, thunk, thunk. I saw little pieces of his landing gear, the fixed, stupid talons. Just shred. They came apart. I kept walking the fire, right up the belly, toward the bomb. He was so close now. I could see the pilot's canopy, a dark black void. I could see the bomb itself. He was in the release window. This was it. The next half second. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I was just working. I was a mechanic, and this was a broken machine. My job was to fix it. I put the stream of tracers right on the nose of the plane, right in front of the cockpit. I held it there. I wasn't just trying to break the machine anymore. I was trying to break the man. I was trying to make him flinch. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The barrel was smoking. The vibration was shaking my bones. The Stuka filled the sky. It was a monster, blotting out the sun. And then, just as he was about to release, just as we were about to die, he flinched. I saw it. The plane, in a vertical dive, suddenly wobbled. It wasn't a clean, precise, tactical maneuver. It was a spasm, a moment of panic. My tracers had either hit him or hit his mind. The plane shuddered. The bomb released. But it was late. It was a panicked, sloppy release. The bomb didn't fall clean, it tumbled. The Stuka, its dive broken, tried to pull up, but it was too low, and something was wrong. My bullets had found something. A control surface, a flap, the engine, something. The plane, no longer screaming, made a new sound. A sick, tearing, metallic groan. The bomb tumbled. It fell, end over end, like a discarded piece of trash. It was a sloppy, panicked drop. It missed me. It missed the crossroads. It plunged into the frozen, snow-covered field 60 yards to my left, halfway between me and the cowering 101st Infantrymen. The explosion was God Almighty. A column of black earth, ice, and snow erupted, 100 feet into the air. The shock wave hit me like a physical punch, knocking me and my 40-pound M1919 back into the mud. My ears rang, a single high-pitched ee. For a second, there was only white static, but I was alive. I spit muddy snow out of my mouth and pushed myself up. Mary Ann's barrel was so hot it was steaming, hissing as snow hit it. I looked at the half-track. The 101st soldiers were still alive, staring at the crater. I looked at the farmhouse. Doc Matthews's aid station was still standing. I had done it. I had made him flinch. I had saved them. But the duel wasn't over. I looked up, scanning the sky for the Stuka. He was still there, but he was broken. My tracers had found a home. The sick, metallic groan I'd heard was his engine dying. He was trailing a thick, greasy line of black smoke. He was too low. He had no power. He was trying to pull his nose up, but the plane was wallowing, fighting him. He wasn't a predator anymore. He was just a 10,000-pound piece of falling scrap metal. The second Stuka, his wingman, was circling high above, watching his partner die. The first pilot, the one who had dueled me, fought for another 5 seconds, but his engine was gone. The plane stalled, its nose dipped one last time, and it plunged straight into the pine forest on the far side of the field, maybe a half-mile away. The crash was a sound I'll never forget. Not a boom like the bomb, but a catastrophic crunch-whoomph as the plane disintegrated through the trees, followed a second later by a bright orange fireball that lit up the grey sky. Then, silence. The only sound on the entire front was the hiss of my gun barrel and the distant crackle of the burning forest. The whimpering in the ditch behind me stopped. "Holy, holy Jesus," the replacement whispered. He slowly peeked his head up over the edge of the ditch. He stared at the column of smoke rising from the forest. He stared at the massive black crater in the field. Then he stared at me. His eyes were no longer filled with terror. They were wide with a kind of terrified awe. "Audrey, you did it. You hit him. You crazy it. You hit him." I didn't answer. I was working. I yanked the smoking belt, the last few rounds hanging limp, out of the feed tray. "Get me another belt," I yelled at him. But my eyes were on the sky. The second Stuka was still up there. He was my new problem. I slammed the new 250-round belt into the gun, yanked the charging handle, and swung the barrel of Mary Ann toward him. I braced the tripod leg. I was ready. "Come on!" I roared at the sky. "It's your turn." The white soldiers from the 101st were on their feet now, standing by their half-track. They weren't hiding. They were watching. Their mouths were open. They were watching me, this crazy black sergeant, openly challenging a Luftwaffe dive bomber to a one-on-one fight. The Stuka pilot saw me. I know he did. He saw his wingman's burning grave in the trees. He saw the crater that should have been me. And he saw me, standing in the open, my M1919 pointed right at him, ready. He was a sane pilot, and he made a sane decision. This crossroads wasn't worth it. This crazy man on the gun was not a target he wanted to engage. He waggled his wings, a sign of, I don't know, disgust, respect, and he banked hard to the east, turning his tail to me and running for home. I had won. I let my finger ease off the trigger. I stood there, in the sudden profound quiet of the Belgian winter, the barrel of my gun smoking. The impossible was done. The suicide mission was a success. The proof was burning in the woods. 5 miles back, in a frozen, sandbagged Belgian barn that served as the regimental command post, a young captain was drinking his 5th cup of lukewarm coffee. He was staring at the tactical map. The red icons showing German armor and Fieber, forward edge of battle area, were pressing in on Bastogne from all sides. His name was Captain Miller. Not my Lieutenant Miller from Normandy, but a man just like him. A man who believed in maps, in doctrine, and in acceptable losses. The crossroads I was on, checkpoint 4, was marked with a single, lonely blue pin. It wasn't considered a hard point. It was a tripwire. "Sir," the radio operator said, his headphones pressed tight, "I've got a strange report from Master Sergeant Hoke, 506 at checkpoint 4. "What is it?" Miller said, not looking up from his map. "The post overrun? We expected that. Tell them to fall back to the main line." "No, sir," the radio man said, his voice hesitant. "That's not the report. Sergeant Hoke reports, enemy air attack, 2 Stukas, heavy engagement." "And?" Miller said, annoyed. "What are the casualties? How long until the post is lost?" "Sir, Sergeant Hoke reports 0 casualties." Miller finally looked up. 0? 2 Stukas and 0 casualties? Does Hoke need a psych eval? "He says, sir," the radio man continued, reading his pad, "that the 333rd machine gun emplacement engaged both aircraft." Miller stood up straight. The other officers in the CP paused their own conversations. "Engaged? What does he mean, engaged? With what? Did that artillery battalion move a Bofors gun up there?" "No, sir. He says, with a single M1919 light machine gun. He says the 333rd Sergeant shot one of them down." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hissing of the kerosene heater. Miller walked over to the radio operator and snatched the notepad. He read the scribbled words. "Downed, downed? Are you telling me that a Engro sergeant with a .30 caliber just shot down a Stuka?" The word Engro hung in the cold air, ugly and sharp, but the real poison was in the word .30 caliber. It was an accusation of absurdity. "That's the report, sir," the radioman said, shrinking in his seat. "It's impossible," another officer, a major, snapped. "It's a mistake. Hoke is shell-shocked. The plane probably had engine trouble. It was a lucky coincidence. This was their enemy perspective. This was their doctrine fighting back. It had to be a mistake, because if it wasn't, then their entire understanding of the war was wrong. Their sane rules were meaningless." "Sir," the radio man said, his hand to his ear, "Sergeant Hoke is clarifying. He says, correction, the 333rd Sergeant engaged the first Stuka, forcing a panicked bomb release, and scored multiple hits. Plane crashed at these coordinates. He's reading a map grid. The second Stuka, he says the 333rd Sergeant challenged it and it retreated. He's asking, sir, he's asking for immediate ammo resupply, for the 30 cal. He says, get this man all the damn ammo you have." The major stared at Captain Miller. Their faces were a mask of pure, unadulterated cognitive dissonance. "Who," the major said slowly, "is at that checkpoint?" Miller checked his duty roster. His face went pale. He remembered. The suicide posting. "It's Sergeant Williams, sir, from the 333rd. The one they call Crazy Williams." The major's expression went from disbelief to a kind of dark, horrified understanding. The enemy had just lost. Their expendable asset, their crazy man, had just held the line when their sane 101st Troops had been hiding. He had done the impossible, and now their own Master Sergeant was on the radio, confirming it, and begging them to send more ammo so the crazy man could do it again. Their entire worldview was broken. The major took a deep breath. He was the officer. He had to make a sane report. He couldn't write this. He couldn't tell High Command that a single crazy black soldier had saved a platoon of Screaming Eagles from Stukas with a 30 cal. He did what all men like him do. He buried it. "Captain," the major said, his voice flat, "log the report. Enemy air attack repulsed at checkpoint 4 by heavy ground fire. 1 Ju-87 confirmed downed. And get Sergeant Hoke's platoon the ammunition they requested. Send it to Sergeant Williams's position." It was the first time he had used my name. The ammo truck arrived 2 hours later. It wasn't a standard quartermaster run. It was a 101st Airborne Jeep, bouncing through the snow, driven by that same Master Sergeant Hoke. He didn't just drop the ammo and run. He and his private muscled 3 heavy crates of 30 caliber next to my gun pit. "Command says heavy ground fire is working," Hoke said, his breath fogging in the cold. He didn't smile, but his eyes were doing the talking. "So keep it heavy, Sergeant." I just nodded. "Will do, Master Sergeant." That was the legacy. That was the change. I was no longer Crazy Williams, the expendable man. I was Sergeant, the man they brought the ammo to. The contagion held. For the rest of that siege, the 101st patrols that passed my crossroads, they didn't just pass. They'd stop. "Morning, Sarge. Need K rations, need coffee?" That wall, the one that was thicker than any concrete, the one that separated us from them, had been breached, not by a general's order. It had been torn down by 500 rounds of steel and a shared moment of impossible survival. My madness had become their anchor. The legend of the Checkpoint 4 gunner spread. It became a Bastogne story, and the Germans, they learned. The Stuka runs on our sector became hesitant, cautious. They'd fly high. They wouldn't dive. They didn't know if another crazy man was waiting for them in the snow. The war ended. I went home to Alabama. I took off the uniform. I never got a medal for what happened at Bastogne. I was never written up for a Silver Star. The official history, just as that major had dictated, said the attack was repulsed by heavy ground fire. It was an anonymous, collective act. It was the same story as Normandy. Lieutenant Miller and all the men like him had stolen my valor again, burying my name in the snow of the official record. But this time, it didn't fill me with rage. The cold, empty space inside me, the one Smiley's death had carved out, had been filled. It was filled with the look in Hoke's eyes. It was filled with the memory of that second Stuka running from me. Smiley died for their rules. I had survived by breaking them. I became a mechanic. I lived a quiet life. I raised a family. But I was never sane again. That clarity, it doesn't just go away. You see the world for what it is. You see the phonies, the cowards, the sane men who hide behind doctrine and let better men die. Decades later, in the 1970s, I got a letter. It was from a man I didn't know. He said he was a grandfather now, living in Ohio. He said, "You won't remember me, but I was the kid in the ditch at Checkpoint 4. He said he was writing to thank me. How you were the bravest man I ever met," he wrote. "They all called you crazy, but I was there, I saw it. You were the only one who wasn't." That was my medal. That was my after-action report. That was the legacy. It wasn't the downed plane. It was the proof. The proof that their rules were wrong, their prejudice was a lie, and their acceptable losses were neither. They thought I was a man who had lost his mind. But the truth is, I was a man who had finally found it. The real madness was the system. The real madness was the racism that put me on that gun in the first place, expecting me to die. My craziness was just me, seeing the truth clearly for the first time and holding the trigger down until the rest of the world caught up. They called him crazy because his courage didn't fit their narrative, but men like Sergeant Williams were the ones who held the line, who fought 2 wars at once and won them both. If you believe these stories of impossible courage deserve to be told, that the crazy ones are the ones who change the world, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're honored to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below with your city or state. Thank you for keeping these voices alive.